There are few moments in this castle that I would describe as tolerable, fewer still that I would call peaceful, and yet there is something about the hour after midnight. In the deepest chambers of the dungeons, when even Hogwarts exhales and sinks into its ancient bones, that I find myself almost at ease. The torches along the lower corridor burn low, offering only a thin shimmer of gold that trembles against the stone walls. Their flames sputter as I pass, recognizing, perhaps, the presence of a wizard who knows these shadows better than most. The scent of cooling potions lingers in the air, bitter herbs, faint ash, crushed roots steeped in simmering cauldrons mere hours before. It is familiar, grounding, a reminder that even after the chaos of teaching dunderheads all day, my craft remains loyal to me. The castle is mercifully quiet at this hour. No chattering students cluttering the corridors. No Gryffindors attempting to sneak up to mischief. No Slytherins trying to impress me with some ill-conceived attempt at ambition. Just the subtle hum of old magic settling into its nighttime rhythm. Hogwarts, though centuries old, does not truly sleep, but it does rest. Its stones soften, its wards loosen, its portraits drift into drowsy mutters behind gilded frames. I prefer it this way, without observers, without expectation, without the constant strain of performance that daylight demands of me. People assume that dungeons are cold and lifeless. They misunderstand. There is warmth here, quiet, steady, earned. The warmth of brewing cauldrons, of long hours spent honing precision, of a sanctuary built not from comfort but from mastery. I have shaped this space as much as it has shaped me. Tonight, the silence feels unusually deep, as though the castle holds its breath in anticipation. Perhaps it senses something lingering at the edge of memory. I do not often permit myself the indulgence of reflection, but certain nights, certain scents, certain flickers of wand light upon stone have a way of unearthing thoughts I would rather keep buried. If you insist on listening, then understand this. I do not tell tales to entertain. I recount them because the quiet demands to be filled, and tonight I find myself too weary to resist its pull. Sit, be still, and for once, do not interrupt me. There is a story the castle has chosen to stir awake, and if you remain silent, I may yet allow you to hear it. A single droplet falls from the ceiling and echoes softly. The torches dim further, and in this hush, this rare and precious hush, I allow the night to begin. The final echoes of footsteps fade long before the last of the torches surrender their flame. Students, noisy, careless, perpetually irritating, scatter to their houses like startled botricles as soon as curfew approaches. Even the staff seem eager to retreat to their chambers. But the dungeons, they never rush. They breathe, withdraw, and settle with a deliberate calm unique to these subterranean halls. I relish this moment when the castle releases its hold on the day and allows darkness to reclaim its rightful place. A faint ripple of water trails along the stones near my classroom threshold. The dungeons are never completely dry. Centuries-old enchantments guide the moisture along predetermined paths, preventing flooding but leaving just enough dampness to keep the air cool. Some professors complain about the cold. I find it invigorating. The stillness is a balm after hours spent enduring the incessant chatter of children convinced they have profound thoughts. I take slow steps into my classroom, my robes trailing behind me with a soft hiss of fabric skimming stone. The room is vast but intimate. Rows of wooden tables worn by unsteady hands and scorched by amateur attempts at potion craft cauldrons, polished but scarred, rests along the sides. They have seen more incompetence than any other objects within these walls. I flick my wand, and the torches brighten just enough to illuminate the room. A soft, golden glow spreads across the shelves. The glass jars lining them sparkle faintly, their contents swaying like strange, dreaming creatures disturbed by the light. The pickled tentacles of a seed-welling creature twitch in their solution. A jar of puffskein fur gives a slight shiver. Sometimes I wonder whether these ingredients have absorbed traces of the castle's magic or mine. Hogwarts has a way of animating even the inanimate. After all, it is alive in the only ways that matter. My day had not been pleasant, though none of them are. Gryffindors had managed, once again, to produce a cloud of toxic pink smoke during what should have been a simple lesson. A pair of first years nearly dissolved a desk. A Ravenclaw asked a question so painfully obvious I felt a physical ache in my skull. And a group of fifth-year Slytherins, my own house, spent half the period snickering at some foolish inside joke. Idiocy knows no house boundaries. Now, at least, there is silence. Blessed, reliable silence. I move to the long counter where the cauldrons once simmered earlier in the evening. The remnants of the day's lessons cling stubbornly to the metal. A less dedicated professor would charm them clean. I refuse to allow magic to replace discipline. The precision required in potion making must extend to the maintenance of the tools themselves. I roll up my sleeves, fine black fabric pushed neatly to the crook of my elbow, and reach for a scrub brush enchanted only to obey the motion of my hands. It glides across the surface of the nearest cauldron with a soft rasp. The rhythm is soothing. Back and forth, small circles. Rinse, dry. Potions is not merely a subject. It is an art that demands respect. A potioneer's tools are extensions of their mind. You cannot brew a flawless sleeping draught with a cauldron coated in yesterday's failure. As I clean, I take inventory of the room. Everything must be accounted for. Every vial returned to its proper shelf. Every pestle placed beside its mortar. The ritual is a comfort, an ordering of chaos, an assertion that despite the unpredictable absurdity of the day, some things remain entirely within my control. My gaze drifts to the back of the room, where a faint shimmer catches my attention. There it is again, that light, soft, subtle, barely noticeable unless one is attuned to the dungeons. As I am, it flickers, then disappears, likely nothing. Perhaps the afterglow of a lingering charm, or perhaps the torches settling. I give it no more thought. The night is long, and illusions of light are common in these depths. I turn back to my work. Once the cauldrons are cleaned, I begin sorting the ingredients that students so carelessly misplaced. A jar of dried wolfsbane, its lid left askew. A container of lacewing flies knocked sideways. A feel of salamander blood perilously close to the table's edge. Merlin's beard. The recklessness of adolescence is enough to shorten one's lifespan. I handle each item with precision. The wolfsbane emits a faint, acrid scent. The lacewing flies are delicate, shimmering like miniature shards of amber. The salamander blood pulses faintly with heat. Not for the first time. I consider how different the world would be if more people approached life with the same care required in potion making. The smallest mismeasurement, the slightest deviation, can mean disaster. The universe ought to operate similarly. As I placed the final jar on the shelf, the torches dim behind me. The dungeons prefer low light. They swallow illumination greedily, leaving only what they deem necessary. I have long accepted that the castle has preferences. It is not merely a structure, it is a sentient guardian, ancient and watchful. My steps echo as I move down the central aisle. Outside the classroom, the corridor stretches deep into shadow, lined with archways that merge into darkness. Most would find it unnerving. I do not. These halls have known me since I was 11 years old, wandering with ink-stained fingers and a mind hungry for knowledge. The castle remembers those who respect it. I reach the door that leads to the corridor and pause. The faint glow appears again, this time at the very edge of my vision, near a corner where two hallways meet. A trick of the torches, I tell myself, or some remnant of charm work cast by an over-eager student. Hardly worth investigating now. There will be time later, during my rounds. For the moment, the sanctuary of the dungeons beckons, and I am in no rush to leave. I extinguish the classroom torches with a wave of my wand. Darkness folds over the room instantly, soft, thick, familiar. The cool air wraps around me like an old cloak. Clicking the door shut behind me, I let out a slow breath. The quiet deepens, the castle settles, and I begin to walk. With each step, my boots tap against stone with a measured, unhurried rhythm. The torches lining the corridor flicker as I pass, as though acknowledging me. The scent of damp moss and mold-infused stone fills the air, accompanied by the faint metallic temps of magic woven into the walls. A gentle whisper echoes from a distant portrait, drifting into silence before words can form. Even the paintings sleep. The suits of armor stand frozen, their visors lowered, their hollow chests humming faintly with dormant enchantments. This is the Hogwarts I prefer. Not the bustling, chaotic circus of daylight, but the ancient fortress beneath it all, disciplined, solemn, unchanging. I continue walking until I reach the Slytherin common room entrance. The wall shifts in recognition, revealing a sliver of greenish glow from within. The students are asleep or pretending to be. Even the most ambitious of them know better than to wander after curfew. I do not enter. I simply stand for a moment, listening to the soft murmur of the underwater currents that flow behind the walls. The Black Lake presses against the stones here, its presence a constant, steady thrum that few notice, but I always have. It calms me, a reminder that beneath the noise, beneath the expectations, beneath the roles forced upon me, there exists something deeper, something still. I turn away and continue down the hall, moving toward my private storeroom and chambers. The mysterious glow flickers again, but this time stronger. It dances at the end of the hallway like a willow, the wisp small, warm, almost inviting. Curious, though not concerned, I tilt my head slightly. The castle is rarely random. If it reveals something, it intends for me to find it. But not yet. Not until I choose to. And so, I move past the glow, allowing it to fade behind me. There will be time to resolve its origin. For now, I have my nightly rituals to complete. Hogwarts breathes softly as I walk deeper into its heart. And for the first time all day, I breathe with it. There is a particular kind of silence in the dungeons that cannot be found elsewhere in the castle. The library's silence is studious, brittle, always on the verge of being shattered by the turning of a page or the scrape of a chair. The great hall's silence is merely the pause between courses. Even the headmaster's office contains a restless quiet, full of worry instruments and muttering portraits. But here, beneath layers of stone and history, the silence is dense. It has weight. It settles on one's shoulders, presses gently against the ribs, and demands that everything, breath, thought, motion, slow to match it. I unlock the heavy oak door to my private storeroom with a flick of my wand. The lock clicks open, and the faintest scent of old parchment and powdered roots spills into the corridor. I step inside and close the door behind me, shutting out the last remnants of the castle's distant noises. My storeroom is not large, but it is efficient. Shelves line the walls from floor to ceiling, laden with jars, fields, and carefully labeled boxes. A narrow wooden table stands in the center of the room, its surface clean, unmarred by scorch marks or careless spills. No student hands touch this table. This is mine. I light the lamps with a murmured charm. They flare to life one by one, casting a warm, steady glow that reaches into the corners, but does not intrude upon the shadows. I prefer it that way. Too much brightness is an irritant. Soft light leaves room for thought. On the table rests a small ledger, a quill, and an inkwell sealed against evaporation. I loosen the stopper, dip the quill, and open the ledger to the day's page. It is not enough to know what one has in stock. One must know precisely how much, when it was harvested, how long it has been preserved, and how it has reacted to its environment over time. Inferior minds dismiss such matters as fussy details. Those minds rarely achieve mastery in anything. I scan the column of notations from earlier in the week. Powdered bicornhorn, low, asphodel roots, acceptable, pickled myrtlap tentacles, recently replenished, courtesy of Hogsmeade's one competent supplier, a minor relief and stopper, a jar of dried valerian sprigs and inhale. Their fragrance is muted now, less vibrant than it was when I acquired them at the start of term. They will serve for the next few weeks, but no more. I adjust the notes in the ledger with a swift, precise stroke. Valerian, reorder before full moon. The act of cataloguing is, in its own way, a potion. One measures, compares, adjusts. A balance of variables, a careful alignment of pieces so that nothing is left to chance. In the classroom, unpredictability is constant. Here, in this room, it has no place. I move along the shelves. A jar of flaxweed, harvested at the full moon, its leaves still faintly luminous. A container of black beetle eyes, clicking softly against glass when disturbed. A feel of phoenix ash, dormant but faintly warm to the touch. Students see ingredients as gross or fascinating in turn, depending on how flamboyant the reaction in the cauldron. They do not understand that the true magic lies not in what the ingredient is, but in how it behaves when placed in relation to others. I pause before a row of phials containing a pale, shimmering liquid moonstone infusion. essential for certain calming drafts, including the more delicate variants of the draft of peace. I hold one phial up to the lamplight. The contents swirl slowly, catching faint silver highlights like threads of starlight pulled down from the sky. Pine, stable, no sediment, no clouding. Exactly as it should be. Still, I mark down the date of decanting and make a mental note. Another batch before term's end. The students will need it. Examinations have a way of unraveling nerves. Even among the more capable, a faint chill stirs the air behind me. I do not turn immediately. The dungeons have currents of their own, guided by enchantments set in place long before my time. Drafts slip through cracks invisible to the eye. Occasionally, a ghost passes by, though the Bloody Baron prefers other corridors at this hour. I continue down the shelf until I reach a low, heavy cabinet near the floor. Wards shimmer faintly over its surface, visible only to those who know what to look for. Restricted ingredients. I kneel and place my hand flat against the cabinet door. The wards recognize my touch and part with a sound like distant fabric tearing, too soft for ordinary ears. The lock clicks open. Inside, wrapped carefully in dark cloth, lies a small assortment of substances that most witches and wizards will never see outside of textbooks. Certain powdered metals, rare venoms, a sample of an extraordinarily regulated root obtained only with direct permission from the ministry. An approval that costs more time and effort than the ingredient itself will ever justify. I do not use these often. Power is not measured by how many dangerous things one can hold. It is measured by how selectively one chooses to apply them. Satisfied that nothing has shifted or spoiled, I rewrap the contents, close the cabinet, and restore the wards. They knit back together with a faint shimmer, then vanish. I straighten slowly, feeling a familiar stiffness in my knees. Perhaps I have spent too many nights like this, bent over cauldrons, stooping to inspect the lowest shelves. My body protests occasionally. My mind does not. On the table, a stack of essays awaits my attention. I consider them for a moment, then deliberately turn away. Not yet. I will endure them later. Instead, I reach for a small wooden box containing freshly cut ingredients that require drying before storage. I open the lid. Inside, neatly arranged in thin layers, are strips of bark, bundled stems, and various roots cleaned of soil but not yet trimmed. I draw my wand and set a gentle drying charm over the contents. Warm air rises in a subtle, controlled current, coaxing moisture from the plants without scorching them. The smell intensifies, filling the room with an earthy, herbal aroma that might overwhelm a less disciplined mind, but only sharpens my focus. I take a knife from a rack on the wall, its blade narrow and wickedly sharp, its handle worn smooth by years of use. This knife has cut more ingredients than most students will ever read about. It fits my hand perfectly. I select a root from the box and place it on the table. Slice, rotate, slice again. The pieces fall into uniform discs, each identical in thickness. The sound is soft but satisfying, the whisper of steel through plant fiber. This, too, is a ritual. Repetition refines precision. Precision breeds excellence. My thoughts wander as I work, but not aimlessly. It is a controlled wandering. I think of the day's classes, of the few students who showed genuine potential. A Ravenclaw girl in 4th year whose cutting technique is almost passable. A Hufflepuff boy whose brewing instincts, though clumsy, show promise. And, of course, the usual suspects. Those who insist on experimenting without instruction, as though potions were a playground rather than a discipline. I think of the staff meeting that dragged on longer than necessary. The headmaster's twinkling eyes and maddeningly calm tone. His catastrophically poor taste in sweets. McGonagall's sharp commentary, often the only voice of reason in those gatherings. Hagrid's booming enthusiasm for beasts that have no business near children. The knife continues its deliberate path. Slice, collect, arrange. The pile of neatly cut root grows steadily. I channel the restless residue of the day into each movement, smoothing irritation into control. On the edge of my awareness, something shifts. A faint gleam, barely there, brushes the corner of my eye. It is not the light of the lamps. It is softer, warmer, a quiet, hovering glow, like a candle held at a distance. The same kind of light I saw earlier in the corridor outside my classroom. This time, it lingers for a heartbeat longer. I set the knife down. The glow fades almost immediately, swallowed by the storeroom's lamplight and the shadows between the shelves. Nothing moves. No jars rattle. No wards hum more loudly than usual. The castle is not in the habit of explaining itself. For a moment, I consider dismissing it as nothing more than the reflection of lamplight on glass. But I know this room. I know its reflective surfaces, the way light falls at certain angles. I know the scent of each jar, the position of each box. Something unusual is stirring in the dungeons tonight. I do not feel alarm. Hogwarts, for all its quirks, has never turned truly hostile to those who understand it. Still, I tuck the observation away, like a mental bookmark. Later, I resume my work, but with a sliver of heightened attention. The knife feels slightly lighter in my hand, my senses just a fraction more alert. Slice, rotate, slice. When the last of the roots is cut, I gather them into a shallow tray and place it beside the drying charm. Soon the pieces will be ready to store, their potency sealed for future use. The predictability of it is reassuring. On the table, the ledger waits. I turn back to it and record the night's adjustments in crisp, narrow script, cut and drying. For bundles of valerian root, cut and drying 3 bundles of marsh valerian. Charms checked, storage wards stable. The quill scratches steadily, leaving dark lines that anchor the day into something orderly. Chaos leaves traces. The ledger exists to counter them. I replace the quill, close the book, and press my palm briefly to its cover. Done for now. There is still one more task before I make my final round through the corridors. On a high shelf near the door rests a small, unassuming box made of dark wood. It is one of the few items in this room that serves no direct instructional purpose. I reach up, retrieve it, and place it gently on the table. Inside, arranged with almost obsessive care, are samples of potion ingredients that have no immediate utility in the curriculum, but which I collected for reasons I would rather not examine too closely. A single pressed lily petal, its color preserved by a stasis charm. A fragment of old parchment bearing the formula for an experimental potion I never completed. a tiny phial of river water taken from a place far from here, long ago. I opened the box only rarely. Tonight, for reasons I would prefer not to name, I lift the lid. The lily petal stares up at me, soft and fragile despite the magic preserving it. I should have removed it long ago. There is no logic in keeping something that serves no practical purpose. And yet, I do. I do not touch it. I never do. I simply look at it for a few seconds, long enough for a faint tightening to form in my chest, short enough that it does not fully take root. Then I close the lid, return the box to its shelf, and ward it with a simple charm. Enough sentimentality. I extinguish the lamps with a flick of my wand. The room falls into shadow, then is briefly illuminated by the faint glow of containment wards, flaring once before settling back into invisibility. When I open the storeroom door, the corridor outside greets me with the same cool stillness as before. At least, at first. As the door closes behind me, the now familiar light appears once more. This time, it is unmistakable. A faint, golden sphere hovers at the far end of the corridor, just beyond where the wall curves out of sight. It pulses gently, expanding and shrinking with a slow rhythm of breath. I remain very still. Not a student's wand light, no accompanying footsteps, no nervous whispering, no clumsy attempts at concealment. Not Peeves. He prefers lurid colors and noise. Not a ghost. Spirits are pale, cold, silver blue, not warm and gold. The golden glow lingers, flickers, then drifts around the corner like a lantern carried by an unseen hand. The castle, it seems, is done hinting. I exhale through my nose. Very well, I murmur under my breath, though no one is there to hear. My nightly rituals are complete, my ingredients catalogued, my cauldrons cleaned. There is nothing pressing enough to ignore what Hogwarts clearly wishes to parade before me. I gather my robes around me and begin to walk toward the corn. The stones beneath my feet feel slightly warmer than usual. The torches brighten as I pass, then dim behind me as though reluctant to interfere. The dungeons have chosen their path for me tonight, and, for reasons I do not yet understand, I allow them to lead. There is a peculiar moment, rare but unmistakable, in which the castle seems to close its hand around you. You feel it before you recognize it. The air thickens, the torches hesitate, and silence grows sharp enough to draw blood from a whisper. It is not danger, not quite. Hogwarts has many ways of guiding those who belong to it, and even more ways of warning those who do not. Tonight, as I follow the drifting golden light through the lower corridor, the air changes, tightens, leans in. I stop. Not because I am uncertain, but because the castle expects me to. If you are foolish enough to believe this school is merely stone and spell work, then you have learned nothing. Hogwarts listens, observes, chooses. It reveals only what it wishes, only when it is ready, and only to those capable of understanding the difference between invitation and threat. I place a hand against the wall. The stone is cool, but beneath it I feel something pulsing, slow, deep, deliberate, like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. Ah, so that is your intention. I have walked these corridors since boyhood. I know their twists, their drafts, their moods. I know when a wall is simply a wall, and when it is trying to tell me something. Tonight, the castle's magic thrums low, steady, insistent. A memory stirs at the back of my mind, unbidden, unwanted, yet persistent. Years ago, when I was a student, barely tall enough to reach the top shelves in this very corridor, I once felt this same pulse. It led me to a broken vase, shattered by a pair of feuding prefects. Another time, to a loose flagstone, revealing a stack of forgotten essays dating back a century. Hogwarts delights in revealing secrets, but only to those patient enough to listen. The golden light reappears for the briefest moment, flickering around the next bend before disappearing again, like a candle intentionally shielded by a hand. I do not follow immediately. Instead, I wait. This is the choice point, the fulcrum of any story worth telling. A single breath, stretched thin. A moment held just long enough to force the listener to wonder what lies beyond the corner. A threat, a memory, a discovery meant for me alone. I see the castle has learned the power of suspense. I take one slow step forward. The torches dim in tandem as though bracing themselves. Dust particles swirl in the faint air currents, golden flecks suspended in an invisible dance. Very dramatic, I murmur under my breath. You have been spending too much time around that headmaster. The walls do not answer, but the pulse beneath my fingertips intensifies by a fraction. Fine. If the castle insists on revealing whatever trifling spectacle it has tucked into this corner of shadow, I will oblige it. My robes whisper softly as I move. One step, then another, not quickly. The castle is listening, and suspense, like potion brewing, requires precise timing. I reach the bend in the corridor, pause for a single heartbeat, long enough for the air to press in around me, and step into whatever Hogwarts has decided I am now prepared to see. There are parts of Hogwarts no map has ever accurately captured. Not the Marauder's abomination, not the careful sketches found in archival records. Not even the enchanted blueprints the founders themselves left behind. The castle shifts too often, breathes too deeply, and hides its intentions with a slyness worthy of a seasoned Slytherin. And yet, some corridors never change. This one, narrow, stone-lined, and lit only by the torches that refuse to burn higher than a soft amber glow, is one I have known my entire life. I walked it as a boy with ink-stained fingers. I walk it now as a man whose hands bear different stains, different scars, different burdens. The stones remember both versions of me. The golden light that led me here has vanished for the moment, leaving only the quiet, thoughtful hum the castle slips into after midnight. It is a hum I trust more than most people. I begin my rounds, not because I am required to. Filch will be stomping through the upper floors soon enough, brandishing that lantern as though he intends to interrogate the walls themselves. No, my rounds are not an obligation. They are a habit, a necessity. The only time I allow my mind to organize the chaos daylight inflicts upon it. My steps are measured, slow, deliberate. I do not rush. Rushing invites mistakes. Above me, the pipes shudder faintly as the black lake shifts. Water presses against ancient stone, making the walls pulse softly with pressure. Anyone else would miss the sound entirely. I hear it as clearly as breath. It has comforted me since my first night here. A quiet pup resounds from behind a suit of armor, barely a sound, more an intake of breath from metal lungs. The armor stands at attention, gleaming faintly despite its age. I slow my pace just enough to observe it. Still awake, I mutter. The visor twitches, then freezes again. Good. Even enchanted guardians grow sloppy if they believe no one is watching. I continue forward. The torches dim and swell in rhythm with my footsteps. The flames responding to my presence as though the dungeons themselves acknowledge the routine of my patrol. Shadows stretch and retract across the walls in long, narrow shapes that make the corridor feel more alive than illuminated. Halfway down the hall, a portrait stirs. An elderly wizard with a beard so long it pools at his feet, blinks blearily, squinting at me from behind spectacles that appear entirely unnecessary for someone composed of pigment and canvas. Said Raz, "Is it morning already?" "No," I say, "and if it were, you would not be the first person I'd inform." The wizard harumphes curls deeper into his embroidered armchair and resumes snoring loudly. At least one thing in this castle never fails to be dramatic. As I walk, I brush my fingertips against a tapestry depicting the early days of Hogwarts. When the founders were young, the castle was new, and the world was far more naive. The threads warm slightly beneath my hand, responding to the faintest pulse of magic. I do not linger. Nostalgia is a luxury I refuse to indulge. But the castle remembers. And tonight it seems determined to remind me of things I did not ask to recall. A few steps later, I feel it again, that subtle pulse beneath the stone. Gentle, rhythmic, insistent, not threatening, simply there, as though the castle is clearing its throat, urging my attention in a particular direction. I sigh. "You are persistent," I tell it. "I'll grant you that." The pulse travels along the wall, leading me deeper down the corridor. I follow, not because I believe myself to be at the mercy of enchanted architecture, ridiculous notion, but because ignoring the castle when it insists on communicating is an easy way to end up with moving staircases that refuse to cooperate for days. Hogwarts does not punish, it inconveniences. At the far end of the corridor, the air grows cooler, not cold, just crisp, like the breath before snowfall. I know this section well. It is older than much of the dungeon network, carved in a time when the founders preferred simplicity over spectacle. It is also a place that has always held memories. I paused before the next archway. Something about the angle, the echo, the faint scent of old parchment and damp stone brings a memory to the surface. Not one I am eager to revisit. A younger version of myself once stood here, clutching a stack of borrowed books so tightly that the covers bent beneath my fingers. I remember the heaviness in my chest, the sharpness of adolescent loneliness, the hollow sense of being unseen in a world bursting with noise. I inhale slowly and step forward. The corridor widens into an alcove lined with half-forgotten portraits. Most are empty, its subjects having wandered off long ago to gossip among themselves. Only one remains. A witch in deep green robes gazes down at me with stern eyes. Not McGonagall, older, Pasha, Salazar Slytherin's first apprentice. If the lore behind this portrait is to be believed, her painted eyes narrow. "Well," she says in a voice like knives on marble, I suppose even the stoic ones get restless. I do not recall asking for commentary. She sniffs. No one ever does. Yet half the portraits in this castle are insupportably chatty. I cannot argue with that. Before I move on, her expression shifts, softening by a fraction, barely noticeable unless one is accustomed to reading the subtlety in Slytherin faces. "Be wary, Severus," she says. "The castle stirs deep magic tonight." I do not respond. I don't need to. She has already retreated into her painted shadows. Good. I have no patience for theatrics this evening. Far ahead, just beyond where the corridor bends, the golden glow flickers once more. This time, it does not retreat. It lingers, waiting, reflecting faint sparks of gold across the damp walls. I feel, not dread, not fear, something quieter. A kind of anticipatory tension, the kind that precedes the moment a potion either succeeds beautifully or detonates. I step toward it. The glow brightens the moment I do, like an encouraging nod. The torches behind me dim, as though the dungeons themselves are shepherding me forward. Unus swollen, unus stackable. Whatever lies ahead is something Hogwarts wants me to see. My robes whisper against the stone floor as I walk, each step measured and deliberate. When I turn the corner, the castle's magic swells in a low hum. The golden glow floats in the center of the corridor, no larger than a fist, no brighter than a lantern. And yet it radiates warmth that settles against my skin, almost familiar. My breath slows, because now, in the quietest hour of night, begin the deepest part of the castle. I finally recognize the light, not its shape, not its purpose, but its feeling. And that feeling is one I have not allowed myself to acknowledge in many years. I take one step closer. The glow pulses once, twice, like a heartbeat, and the castle, ancient and endless, holds its breath from the perspective of Severus Snape. The glow hovers in the corridor like a lingering thought, one I have refused to think for decades. It is warm, but not with heat. It is bright, but not blinding. It is familiar in a way that makes my stomach tighten, though I refuse to name why. For a moment, I simply stand there, allowing the castle's whispering pulse to sink into the stones beneath my feet. The torches have grown quiet. Even the low groan of the black lake above us goes still, as though the entire structure is holding its breath. Hogwarts wants something from me, and whether I deserve it or not is irrelevant. The castle has never concerned itself with my comfort, only my inevitability. The glow drifts backward by a few inches, then stops, as though encouraging me to follow. When I do, it glides down the hallway, leading me toward a narrow archway I have passed 1,000 times without noticing. It reveals itself only rarely. Trickery of architecture and magic, an aperture that opens in the presence of certain spells, certain emotions, certain memories. Tonight, it waits for me. As I cross the threshold, a faint shift presses at my chest. Not painful, just present, like the moment a sleeper inches from waking. I find myself standing inside a small chamber, unused and forgotten, with walls warped slightly by time. There is no furniture, no windows, no markings on the stone. Nothing except an old wooden table at the room's center, covered in dust. And lying atop it is a single, familiar object. A book, tattered, frayed along the spine. Ink staining the pages like late-night secrets spilled in haste. My book. Potions notebook from my school years. One of several I filled obsessively until morning light forced me to stop. I hadn't seen this particular one since I left Hogwarts as a student. I never thought to look for it. I assumed it was gone, consumed by the shifting tides of the castle. And now, here it lies, as though it has been waiting. I approach slowly. My footsteps stir the dust, sending faint spirals into the air like grey memories rising from the floor. The glow dims as I draw closer, not vanishing, but yielding, stepping aside so the book may speak in its own silent way. I rest my fingertips on the cover. The leather is dry, cracked from age, but warm. Too warm for a book abandoned in the dungeons. I open it carefully. The first page bears my handwriting, sharp, angular, impatient. The ink strokes reveal the person I once was, determined beyond his years, desperate for knowledge, hungry for mastery, wounded by invisibility. I turn the page. More notes, more formulas, more fragments of a mind, trying to prove something no one else would see. Then I reach a page that stops me cold. A flower petal, pressed flat between the pages, preserved with magic woven so gently I barely recognize it as my own. Pale yellow, delicate. I know its meaning instantly. I wish I didn't. Hogwarts has no mercy in choosing which memories to unearth. The petal once belonged to a lily. I feel a small, treacherous pull in my chest, an emotion I spent years carving out of myself. I close my eyes briefly, though not to escape the memory. Memories do not relent when you shut your eyes. They grow stronger in darkness. When I was a student, this chamber didn't exist, but the shadows of the dungeons did. Late at night, when even Slytherin's common room felt suffocating, I used to slip from my dormitory and wander these halls with only my thoughts for company. The world above seemed too loud, too cruel, too bright. Down here, the quiet felt like understanding. I would bring books with me, potions, texts, heavier than I was, journals filled with scribbles no one else could decipher, spells half-finished and half-amended. And sometimes I brought this notebook. There was a night, one I refused to think of for years, when I sat in a corner of the dungeon, wand-light hovering above my shoulder, experimenting with a new calming draft I believed I could improve, and she found me, Lily. Her laughter, soft but brilliant, echoed off these stones like light trapped in shadow. She had come looking for me, worried, she said, because no one else had seen me all day. We talked for hours, about potions, about magic, about anything, really. I remember the way she held that very lily between her fingers, plucked fresh from the courtyard earlier in the day. I remember how she set it on my notebook before she left, telling me the flower suited the cover. I said nothing then. I rarely said what mattered. I said too many things that didn't. The castle must have taken the notebook after I left it behind during one of those late nights. It must have preserved it, hidden it, waited for a night when the wards felt whatever they sensed in me now. Possibly regret, possibly exhaustion, possibly the brittle ache that comes when old memories crawl out of corners you've sealed. I closed the notebook gently, careful not to disturb the petal. Dust settles around me in a slow, spiraling descent. The silence in the chamber feels thicker than the corridor outside, heavier as though saturated with the memory's weight. The glow hovers at my shoulder, soft, patient. For the first time, I touch it. It is warm, warmer than the book, warmer than the air. A quiet warmth, like the brush of a hand that refuses to harm you. It pulses once beneath my fingertips, then settles. The sensation spreads through my palm, up my arm, into a place I do not welcome warmth. So this is your game tonight, I murmur. Memory, reflection, nostalgia. The glow does not respond, but it doesn't need to. The castle has made its intentions known. This is no trick, no threat. This is a reminder. One I did not ask for, but one the castle believes I cannot continue without. I set the notebook down, close the book entirely, and stare at the table where it rests. The air feels different now, lighter, though I wish it didn't. The room feels different, alive, though nothing has moved, and I feel something I had hoped age would numb. The glow drifts toward the exit, pausing just long enough for me to understand. It is not done with me yet. I let out a slow breath, straighten my robes, and follow it out of the chamber. Behind me, the door melts back into the wall, leaving no trace of the room or the memory it forced me to face. Hogwarts opens its doors when it desires and closes them just as swiftly. As I step into the corridor once more, the golden light steadies, waiting for me like an unfinished sentence. Very well. If the castle insists on dragging me deeper into its quiet revelations, I will see where they lead. But I cannot shake the feeling, one I refuse to name, that the night has only begun to unravel its intention, and I am no longer certain I wish to see where they end. From the perspective of Severus Snape, there are pauses in the castle's rhythm that feel intentional. Gaps between heartbeats, spaces where the old stones seem to draw in breath and weight. Most people never notice them. They wander these corridors with the obliviousness of moths bumping into magic they can't begin to comprehend. But tonight, the pause is unmistakable. Hogwarts isn't simply leading me, it is studying me, and I detest being studied. Strange, isn't it? Coming from a man who spends his days dissecting every whispered conversation, every flicker of wand light, every trembling nuance of adolescent emotion in my classroom. I read students the way others read books, quickly, precisely, critically. But to have the castle turn its gaze inward onto me is something else entirely. The glow lingers several feet ahead, just out of reach, humming with a warmth that doesn't belong in the dungeons. I follow it, yes, but I do not do so blindly. I watch the way shadows quiver at its edges, how dust motes drift toward it as though drawn by gravity. Magic leaves traces. Magic has tells. Even the oldest magic cannot hide its intent forever. And Hogwarts is very old. I slow my pace, and the glow slows with me. I stop, and it hovers, waiting. It is mimicking my rhythm, studying my choices. A lesser mind might find comfort in that notion. The idea that the castle cares, that its guiding lights, its shifting staircases, its whispering corridors are some benevolent force designed to protect or nurture. Sentimentality makes fools of even the brightest, but I know better. Magic is neither kind nor cruel. It is observant, but it adapts. It responds to what it recognizes. So the question becomes, what has it recognized in me tonight? I take a single step backward, deliberately, purposefully, a small test. The glow flickers, hesitates, then retreats by the same distance. Interesting. Not Peeves, not a poltergeist trick, not one of Dumbledore's absurd enchantments. He prefers his magic loud, colorful, and irritatingly whimsical. This glow is tuned, attuned, mirroring, responding, as though I am not following it at all, as though it is following me. And that, I suspect, is exactly what the castle wants me to notice. I draw a long breath, letting the cold dungeon air fill my lungs. There is a specific taste to this air, metallic, old, threaded with traces of potions lingering in cracks and crevices from centuries of brewing. It grounds me, anchors me. You intend to lead me somewhere? I say quietly, addressing the glow. Or perhaps you intend for me to lead you. The glow pulses once, a response. I almost smile, though of course I don't. Not when the castle itself is listening. Not when sentiment is the quickest path to unraveling. Still, the glow leans forward again, drifting just enough to signal movement, waiting for me, listening for me, following me, even as it guides. A curious dance, one that would be comical if it were not so disconcertingly familiar. I have spent years maneuvering through political corridors not unlike these physical ones. The castle's approach mirrors the same strategy used by people who want something without admitting they want it. A lure disguised as a path disguised as a question disguised as a memory. The air tightens around me again, subtle, careful, precise, a deliberate pressure, a silent nudge. Ah, there it is. The engagement technique the castle favors tonight. Not overt guidance, not force, but tension, suspense. An unfinished thought suspended in the space between torches, a tactic I know well. Because nothing compels attention, nothing pulls the mind forward, like the sensation that something is just beyond reach, something half-hidden, something almost spoken. The glow begins to drift once more, but slower this time, as though inviting me to follow at my leisure. I adjust my robes, lift my chin, and step forward. Not because the castle commands it, but because, just this once, I am curious. And curiosity, however inconvenient, is the only reason anyone uncovers anything worth knowing in Hogwarts at all. The glow drifts ahead of me with the unhurried grace of something ancient, older than the bricks beneath my feet, older than the wards woven through these walls, older perhaps even than the Founder's first footsteps on these stones. I follow not because I trust it, but because Hogwarts rarely acts without intent. The castle wastes nothing, not movement, not whispers, not memories. If it has chosen to guide me tonight, then there is purpose layered beneath the silence. The corridor curves sharply, and for a moment the glow vanishes from sight. I step round the bend cautiously, feeling the pressure change in the air as though crossing an invisible threshold. The space ahead opens into a small, circular chamber, one I have never bothered to inspect closely in all my years here. It is quiet, almost impossibly so. No sound leaks in from the corridors. Even the hum of the enchanted torches beyond the archway fades to nothing. The glow waits at the center of the room, suspended above the floor like a lantern on an invisible string. Its light moves across the stone walls in gentle sweeps, revealing patterns I've overlooked for decades. Scratches, indentations, marks made by tools or magic long before my time. This room has history. All of Hogwarts does. But this chamber, this place, feels curated, like a memory the castle preserved deliberately. I approach slowly, watching the glow as my shadow stretches across the floor. The closer I get, the warmer the air becomes. Still cool by most standards, but in the dungeons even a hint of warmth stands out. The glow pulses twice in quick succession, as though acknowledging my presence, then moves toward a narrow shelf carved directly into the stone. On the shelf sits a jar, small, glass, dusty. I feel my eyebrows pull together. The castle did not guide me here for something mundane. I step forward and reach out with a practiced caution, brushing dust from the lid with the back of my knuckles. The glow hovers beside me, steady and silent. Peering through the foggy glass, I see movement, faint, flickering, rhythmic. For an instant, I assume some student has misplaced a jar of enchanted embers or bottled wand sparks. But the motion is different, softer, alive. I unseal the lid. A soft warmth escapes, barely noticeable, but distinct enough to brush against my fingers. Then, rising from within the jar, drift several minuscule lights, golden, luminescent, floating upward like sparks, searching for air. They are tiny, magical fireflies. Charms lessons sometimes produce them as an unintended side effect when a spell leaks ambient magic. Young wizards rarely control the radiance properly. The creatures scatter and hide in the castle's darker corners where they can bask in ambient enchantment. But these fireflies, they are different. They don't buzz erratically or glow in quick, irregular bursts. They move slowly, gracefully, clustering together as though woven from the same thread of magic that formed the guiding orb itself. One drifts close enough to hover above my palm, and when I lift my hand slightly, it reacts, dipping, rising, circling my fingers with an almost inquisitive curiosity. It is ridiculous that something so insignificant has captivated the castle's attention. Yet Hogwarts builds meaning out of the smallest things. A forgotten note behind a portrait, a broken quill, a stray spell meant as a joke. Everything leaves a mark. I watch the fireflies gather above the jar, floating in a loose, shimmering cluster. They pulse in unison, soft waves of gold spreading outward like breath. In the stillness of the room, their glow reflects in the jar's glass, in the stones beneath my feet, in the dust hanging in the air. They are peaceful, infuriatingly peaceful. "How did you get here?" I murmur, though of course they cannot answer. A firefly bobs once, as if trying. I should find this irritating. I should be annoyed that I was dragged through half the dungeons for something as trivial as errant magical insects. I should be thinking of my unfinished work, of the drying ingredients, of the essays awaiting my inevitably scathing commentary. But as the fireflies drift, forming a loose spiral of soft gold, my irritation refuses to take root. There is a quiet beauty to them, simple, unobtrusive, entirely at odds with my surroundings. A delicate magic that has no ambition, no consequence, no burden. In a castle saturated with memories of war, fear, triumph, failure, brilliance, and catastrophe, These creatures exist without purpose. They exist simply because they were born of magic and happened to find refuge here. Perhaps that is why the castle chose to show them to me. A reminder that not everything created from chaos becomes destructive. The guiding glow pulses gently, and I realize, somewhat reluctantly, that it is not separate from the fireflies. It is them. Many of them, a collective light woven from countless smaller ones, merging and dividing as they see fit. Their magic resonates with the ambient enchantments of the castle, responding to my presence as though they understand the dungeons belong to me as much as I belong to them. I lower my hand into the jar and begin coaxing the remaining fireflies out, moving with slow, deliberate precision. They rise willingly, drifting to join the swirling cluster in the air above. "Off you go," I mutter, before Filch attempts to swat one of you with his lantern. A soft shimmer washes across the chamber. The fireflies pulse gently and float toward the archway. Before leaving, one remains behind, a slightly brighter one, lingering near my shoulder. It hovers there for several seconds before drifting forward, as though urging me to follow. I exhale in annoyance. Must you insist on theatrics? But the firefly waits, suspended in the air with stubborn patience, so I follow. The fireflies lead me back into the main corridor. As soon as they cross the threshold, the dungeon's torches brighten, not much, but enough to cast a warmer hue across the stones. The air feels different, lighter, as though something in the labyrinth of tunnels has just exhaled. The fireflies disperse gradually, drifting upward toward vents in the ceiling where faint air currents will carry them to the charmed corridor or the central stairwell. Their light grows more distant with each second until they disappear entirely. Only the single firefly, the brighter one, remains. It floats before me, weaving slow, patient loops. I watch it for several long moments, weighing the absurdity of allowing myself to be herded by an enchanted insect. Then again, I have allowed worse. "Very well," I say quietly. "Lead on." The firefly brightens once, then ascends, gliding toward a corridor I rarely use except when the castle's misbehaving staircases trap students in inconvenient places. The air ahead feels heavier again, though not oppressively so, more like the weight of anticipation settling on the shoulders of stone. Somewhere deep within the castle, a ward shifts. A low vibration hums against the soles of my boots. Hogwarts is not done with me. The firefly hovers before another bend, waiting. I follow without hesitation this time, because now I understand. Tonight's revelations are not random. Hogwarts has decided to show me something it believes I need to see, something that comes after memory, after reflection, after gentle reminder. The firefly flickers once more, casting a glow down the silent corridor, and I walk into the dim light, expecting, unwelcome though it may be, the castle's next truth waiting in the shadows beyond. The firefly drifts down the corridor with a confidence entirely disproportionate to its size. It glows steadily, never frantic, never flickering with fear or confusion. It moves with purpose, as though the castle has placed a simple, harmless creature in the role of guide, knowing I would not ignore something so small when it insists so persistently. The castle has always possessed a cruel sense of irony. My footsteps echo softly as I follow. The dungeons are quieter now than they were even moments ago. Silence has deepened, not merely as an absence of sound, but as an atmospheric shift, a thickening of the air, a settling of magic, a calm that reaches deeper than skin or bone. Hogwarts exerts influence subtly, the way a master potioneer adjusts a simmering brew, 1 degree, 1 second, 1 grain at a time, until the whole room changes. We approach a narrow alcove I have passed countless times without noticing anything remarkable. Tonight, however, the air around it feels full, as though the castle has poured something into the space that was previously empty. The firefly circles the stone archway, then floats through it. I follow. The chamber beyond is small, circular, and quiet, similar to the one where I found my old notebook, yet somehow even more still. The walls bow inward slightly, forming a near-perfect dome overhead. In the center stands a simple bench carved from a single slab of granite. No embellishment, no markings, no decoration, just stone, unyielding and honest. I remain where I am for a moment, unsure what precisely the castle expects of me. The firefly settles gently on the bench, dimming its light to a soft, steady pulse. It waits with the unsettling patience of something that does not measure time in seconds or breaths. I approach it carefully. The air grows warmer near the bench, though there is no logical source for the heat. Magic leaves traces, not warm, not cold, but felt. The way grief is felt, the way hope is felt, not physical, but atmospheric. The room has that quality now. Reluctantly, I lower myself onto the bench. It is cold at first, unpleasantly so, sinking into muscle and bone, but the sensation softens as my weight settles. The firefly drifts upward, hovering a few inches from my eye level. Its glow swells briefly, casting a gentle illumination across the chamber. For once, I do not speak. The silence becomes something different, something internal, thoughts slow, the echo of old noise fading into stillness. My breathing eases. A faint hum vibrates through the stone beneath me, steady and ancient. A heartbeat I have always known yet rarely acknowledged. Hogwarts, this room, this moment, is not meant for revelation, not for confrontation, not for memories dragged from dark corners. It is meant for remembering something far simpler, something I have sacrificed more often than I admit: stillness. The firefly drifts closer, its light warming the space inches from my chest. The glow reminds me, painfully and unavoidably, of the notebook from earlier, the pressed lily petal, the echo of her laughter in the dungeons, the memory of who I was before the world hardened my edges. I lower my gaze, letting the quiet deepen without resistance. The bench, the chamber, the air, they all hold silence the way a cauldron holds a simmer, carefully, steadily, without letting anything spill over. Hogwarts does not show kindness often. It does not choose softness without reason. This castle is a fortress, a maze, a battleground, a sanctuary. It decides what each person needs, often long before the person realizes it. Tonight, it has given me the one thing I spent years denying myself: a moment to breathe, a moment to stop performing, stop teaching, stop guarding, stop remembering, stop forgetting, a moment simply to exist. The firefly pulses once more, warm and gentle, and then begins to drift upward toward the top of the chamber. As it ascends, its glow thins into a thread of gold, like a trail of memory unraveling slowly in the air. At the apex of the dome, the thread dissolves. Darkness settles once more, but not oppressive darkness, soft darkness, the kind that invites rest rather than fear, the kind that belongs to quiet chambers and late hours and hearts that have carried too much for too long. I lean back slightly against the cold stone wall, letting the silence envelop me. No torches sputter, no portraits murmur, no dungeon pipes groan under the weight of the lake. Everything has been muted for this space, for this moment, for this necessary nothingness. I close my eyes, and for the first time in longer than I care to admit, I allow myself to rest. Not sleep yet. Rest. Stillness. A moment of unclaimed thought, unburdened breath. The castle hums softly around me, a lullaby only someone who has lived within these walls for decades could recognize. Hogwarts does not offer affection, but sometimes it offers peace. And tonight, whether I asked for it or not, the castle insists I take it. I sit there for minutes, perhaps longer, until the bench beneath me feels less like stone and more like grounding. Until the air feels less like expectation and more like acceptance. Until my heartbeat matches the pulse of magic hidden deep in the walls. Only then do I open my eyes. The chamber looks exactly as it did before, empty, simple, quiet. The firefly is gone, the light is gone, but the feeling remains. A quiet mind, unusual, unwanted, necessary. I rise slowly, smoothing my robes, allowing the silence to cling to me like a cloak. When I step back into the corridor, the torches brighten just enough to welcome my return. The castle has said what it wished to say, and I, though I would never admit it aloud, have heard it. When I step out of the chamber, the corridor greets me with a hush so complete it feels unnatural, not threatening, not ominous, simply expectant, as though the stones themselves are watching me return from a place they cannot follow. The torches resume their low, steady burn, no brighter than before, but warmer somehow. Touched by the remnants of the quiet the castle forced upon me, I move slowly, letting my steps fall without urgency. The dungeons absorb sound like a living thing, softening every footfall until it becomes part of the castle's breath. The walls carry no whispers. Even the portraits, those insufferable, opinionated relics, remain silent in their frames. Their painted eyes follow me with subdued curiosity, as though sensing that tonight is not a night for commentary. And for once, I am grateful. Hogwarts at night is a different creature entirely. During the day, it is a whirlwind of movement and voices and magic hurled carelessly by children who believe themselves invincible. But after midnight, the castle coils inward, shedding noise and distraction until all that remains is its ancient heart. A pulse deep beneath the stone, steady and patient, unchanging across centuries. As I walk, that pulse seems to echo lightly beneath my ribs, a subtle rhythm barely there, but grounding. That chamber, whatever its purpose, however old its enchantments, was not meant for spectacle or revelation. It was simply meant for stillness. A place where even someone like me, especially someone like me, could allow the weight of the day, the decades, the choices to settle without crushing. I do not indulge stillness often. It invites thought, reflection. Both are luxuries I cannot afford in excess. And yet, tonight, the castle insisted. And who am I to argue with ancient architecture that knows me far too well? I continue my rounds out of habit, though I already know there is nothing left to find. The fireflies have scattered, returning to the walls and vents and hidden crevices, where they will drift unseen until another careless charm summons them. The strange glow has dissolved entirely. The guiding pulse beneath the stones has softened into the usual quiet hum. The dungeons are themselves again, but I am not entirely the same. Not changed. Change requires intention, and I am too stubborn for that. No, the shift is subtler, more like the tiniest adjustment to a simmering potion, imperceptible to most, yet enough to alter the fragrance. The clarity, the drift of steam rising from the cauldron. By the time I reach the door to my quarters, the torches have dimmed to thin amber embers. My hand rests on the latch for a moment. There is no urgency, no dread, only a quiet readiness to continue what the castle has demanded of me tonight. When I step inside, the familiar scent of herbs and parchment greets me. My chamber is modest for a professor, though more organized than most would expect. Shelves filled with volumes arranged by topic, by potency, by usefulness. A cauldron cooling in the corner, charms woven around it to prevent any student from mistaking it for something safe. A chair positioned beside a small writing desk where I keep my most essential notes. And on the desk, my journal lies open to a blank page. I cross the room, set my wand aside, and sit. The chair creaks, a soft, tired sound that mirrors the subtle ache in my shoulders. I pick up the quill but do not yet write. My thoughts settle like sediment drifting to the bottom of a potion flask, forming layers that are easier to examine once they rest. Hogwarts is a peculiar teacher. It offers lessons without warning, without schedule, without explanation. It reveals what it wishes, memories preserved in dust, truths carried in silence. Reminders hidden in corridors one passes daily without truly seeing. Tonight, it chose to offer me something I neither sought nor expected. Stillness, reflection, peace. The quill hovers above the page for a long moment before I finally lower it. I write nothing of the fireflies, nothing of the chamber, nothing of the petal or the memory pressed into the pages of a notebook I once sheltered like a lifeline. Such things do not belong in writing. They belong in corners of the mind, carefully locked away. Instead, I write only this. The castle is awake tonight. It is enough. I close the journal, extinguish the lantern, and rise. The darkness settles around me like a familiar cloak, but it no longer feels heavy. It feels quiet, contained, manageable. My room is still. The dungeons are still. The castle, finally satisfied with whatever task it set before me, allows its ancient magic to drift into slumber. I sit on the edge of my narrow bed, undoing the clasps of my outer robe with slow, methodical movements. The room breathes with me. My thoughts do not race. They do not claw. They simply move, steady, patient, calm, strange, unwelcome, perhaps, but not unpleasant. I lie back against the pillows, exhaling once more as the darkness folds over me completely. The hum of the castle deepens into something softer, almost a lullaby, if one were foolish enough to use such a word. My eyes close. For the first time in months, maybe years, Sleep does not feel like surrender. It feels like rest. And Hogwarts, ancient, watchful, mercilessly sentimental when it chooses, keeps silent vigil as I drift into the quiet the castle carved for me from its very stones. Tonight, at last, the dungeons sleep, and so do I.